This week on the agenda, streaming wars. Netflix, Amazon, Disney, Tencent, Apple. Who's really winning the battle for our subscription bucks? $15 million years of streamed content is what viewers watched in 2021 in the United States alone. It was a marker of the boom time created by COVID lockdowns for the streaming market. In Europe, 4 players dominate: Netflix, Amazon, Apple and Disney, with 72% of the market in 2020. But with more than 200 streaming platforms available worldwide, most charging a monthly fee, has the market reached its peak? Netflix has long been the dominant power, but fortunes fade. Subscriber numbers for the fourth quarter of 2021 slumped way below market estimates. Shares fell 37% overnight, shaving off some 2/3 of its value, leaving it worth around $100 billion. So, just what does the future hold? The big issue for the big streamers now is churn. The number of subscribers deciding their content isn't worth the monthly subscription and cancelling their accounts. Last year, nearly 40% of customers cancelled at least one subscription in the US. So all players need to focus on customer retention. The best way to keep subscribers is to have the very best content, must-see shows you can't get anywhere else. But that's expensive. Reducing fees is another option, but again, costs money. The third option, a subscription and ad-funded hybrid. It's a route Netflix and Disney have already said they're looking into. But when their favourite shows suddenly pause for an ad break, will viewers switch off? So just where is the streaming industry headed? I'm joined now from New York by Andrew Rosen, founder of streaming insights consultancy Parqor, and from Gothenburg by Tony Gunnarsson, principal TV analyst for media consultants Omdia. Gentlemen, it's great to see both of you. Thanks so much for coming on the programme. Now, Andrew, let me start with you. The pandemic was boom time for streaming services because we were all at home, we were all watching much more TV than we might have been otherwise, we were all searching for good stuff to watch. So was it inevitable that subscribers to platforms like Netflix were going to fall away when life returned to something like normal?
I think the answer is yeah. I mean, Netflix was talking about this 2 years ago. They were warning of the pull forward impact. I think the uncertainty in all that is, what did the pull forward impact mean? And I think that we're seeing that play out. I think they're a bit caught off guard by how it's played out. I don't know if that's a function of hubris or a function of the fact that it's actually an incredibly complex business that they're in. And so I think the other thing, though, to highlight is the competitive field flattened a bit, right? That you actually saw streaming services from legacy media companies find their footing after a few years of being a bit clumsy and having difficulty defining their value proposition for consumers and defining the technology. And so I think some key things have changed in that sense.
Tony, I'm wondering if you agree. Do you think what's happened with Netflix is just a correction or a sign of something we should be worrying about in terms of that subscription business model?
Yeah, no, I think it's both. So we've got to be clear. I mean, like, there's been a lot to talk about streaming year zero being around 2020. But I've been covering this industry for 15 years, and Netflix internationally expanded in the early 2010s, and we've been following that movement since then. In terms of the pandemic, it's great. It mostly reinforced existing underlying trends. That's been our sort of core piece of analysis. It didn't change anything necessarily, just accelerated something that was already happening. One of the key things that we saw was that sort of digital transition between legacy paid TV and SVOD, essentially, that happened earlier because of the pandemic. The key thing really is that, pre-2020, Netflix had a free market. They could enter new markets. There was no real competition. But now since then, of course, all their traditional media partners have launched their own services. So, now it is a tougher time for Netflix as it is for other services.
Andrew, some of them, I'm thinking Disney Plus, their subscriber numbers are increasing. So what's happening here?
Well, so the competition's an interesting question. I think that there's a lot that gets distorted and wrong in that conversation. I think number one, when you look at something like Disney or Paramount Plus and their success internationally, they're basically mapping their library to target audiences, right? So that if you really wanted to understand why something like Paramount Plus is having, think that they're going to reach 100 million subscribers by 2025, you can look at their kids library as probably a primary driver. The same thing goes for Disney Plus. The reality for Netflix is 60% of its consumption that they've reported is kids and family. But then the broader question is, what does international growth look like, and why is it so significant, and why we're seeing it now, which is there's just underserved audiences, right? That you have so much penetration now with smartphones being number one, but then secondly, and kind of the bigger one, which is you do have 1 billion smart connected TV households worldwide.
With 200 plus streaming companies, you might think, gosh, it's actually a crowded market. Maybe, Tony, too much choice for consumers.
Where I live in the world, in the Nordics and Northern Europe, we have on average 15 to 18 SVOD services per market. It's insane and it's unsustainable for sure. But I think Andrew said a really good point. We're still in the early phase of this. Even though streaming at the mass market sort of commercial level has been around for we're in the second decade now. It's still really early. We have to imagine that we're back in early days of pay TV or early days of television even. That's how big this shift is from legacy cable and satellite and broadcast TV to streaming. It is really a major revolution in how information is distributed and content and entertainment. And I think we're going to get into 2030s when we start to see that really change into something.
Okay, while there's everything to play for, I want to talk about making money and how the streamers are going to do that. I know Netflix and Disney, they're toying with the idea, aren't they, of maybe reducing some of their fees, but including some ads, which seems to go completely against the grain, against the DNA of some of these streamers, such as Netflix and Amazon. Andrew, what do you think about that?
I think it's it's funny. It's a complicated answer because everybody has a different model, right? The two best models out there, I'd say the three best models out there are Disney's, are Apple's, and they're Amazon's, because all of them are models where streaming is additive and not fundamental to the model, right? That ultimately, recently Disney just announced for this June through September a special offering for Disney Plus subscribers where they could get 25% off at Disney theme parks or Disney World, and that tells you that for somebody paying $6.99 a month, they're going to get 25% off on something that they spend typically $5,000 to $6,000 on at least. And so you start to realize that the model is much more interesting when you're looking at what you can upsell to the consumer and how well you understand them, right? That whether the business model is fundamentally built around the consumer or not.
Tony, I can see you nodding away there. I'm wondering what you're thinking about ad-funded models and how that changes the relationship with the consumer.
Yeah, well, there's multiple different ways to approach that question. And I've spent a decade telling people that Netflix will never have adverts. They now announced it. It is a big game changer for Netflix. It's, I have colleagues who predicted it in a report last year, and I said, no, that's not going to happen. I was wrong. But I think I've tried to explain it because I think it's quite interesting. There are different regions and different needs around the world. In Europe, tolerance to watching advertising is much lower than in North America, for example, for a whole range of different reasons. I think if Netflix adds a sort of cheaper ad tier in Americas, perhaps in Asia, that could be very successful. They will probably do really well by that. In Europe, that probably won't work as well. At the same time, we know that, from Disney to, some of our local services are looking to add, to evolve away from that classic SVOD model to a hybrid with AVOD tiers. That is happening here as well. So I know that there's a push from the industry to sort of make Europeans more susceptible to watching adverts. Whether that's going to succeed or not, I'm not sure. But currently everyone is talking about that hybrid model, and I can see the logic of it, but I'm certainly of a generation that pays YouTube to remove adverts. I can't stand them. I will never accept having adverts on a platform that I pay for. But perhaps generations that come after us are going to be more price-minded. Perhaps, who knows?
Okay, so you're an all-out European who doesn't like adverts. Let's talk to the American. Back to you, Andrew. I'm wondering then, where are the opportunities for growth? Not just geographically, but also in terms of content.
Growth then has to come nominally from selling more subscriptions, which is going to happen internationally. I mean, the reality for Netflix is, for all the negative press about its previous quarter, most growth came internationally, and actually without Russia, without the US, it had a positive growth story. And so there is going to be growth. It's lower ARPU growth, right? Lower average revenue per user growth, simply because those marketplaces aren't as considered as premium, and they have different price sensitivity than the US, as premium as the US, where the price sensitivity is actually quite is much lower. So growth is a really tricky question. I think the sort of the interesting growth hacks we're seeing is something like the Paramount Plus has announced deals with Canal Plus and Sky, where it's these what are called hard bundle deals. They're basically saying we'll share consumer data at the transaction level, right? So in other words, you get the credit card data, we get the credit card data, but there is the real risk in those relationships that they don't get 100% of the data. And ultimately, if you really are focused on the future and focused on growth, and most importantly of all, understanding what your consumer wants and hyper serving that, you don't want a third party in there that has better data, better ad solutions than you have, better understanding of the consumer, more tools for making that consumer happy. That at some point you've invited a wolf into the hen house.
I'd like you both to now look into your crystal ball and give me a quick outlook. Where do you see the streaming industry going in the medium term? Andrew, you go first.
I'm really focused on free. I think that these free ad-supported TV services like Pluto, but even YouTube, are, for all the talk about the consumer price sensitivity around advertising, these guys are really well positioned to take market share from the paid services, for one. And it's actually like a very sort of profound reason that was recently tweeted by the executive chair of the IAB, Randall Rothenberg, and it's a really must-read thread. But his basic point is, look, these are walled gardens, all of these places. The minute you go into Netflix, or the minute you go into Disney Plus, or the minute you go into like a niche app like Shudder, which is 49 different genres of horror, you're in that walled garden and you have no idea what's going on elsewhere. Whereas when we tune into our linear television or cable box, there's a list of what's going on other channels and other services. And so the thing that highlights is that streaming services are actually these small, contained, walled gardens, and the less that they have to serve you with, the less likely you are to stay in there. Whereas a lot of these fast, particularly Pluto, replicate the electronic programming guide of cable, or they try to hyper serve the consumer with things that are going to keep them excited, right? Fox's Tubi TV just announced that after every World Cup broadcast, replays of the games are going to be immediately available on their fast Tubi. And I think that the free part of it answers a lot of the questions you were asking earlier about growth and economics. But the size of the universe, and even in the case of YouTube, right, hundreds of millions of videos, I want to say being uploaded each day, maybe, right? Like it's such an extraordinary universe, but that in between you and those videos is an algorithm that says, well, you watched this before, here's something you may like, right? So there's all these particular universe is being built in these new walled gardens that are free, that are much more expansive than the streaming services that you pay for.
Tony,
yeah.
where do you see the future of streaming?
So, okay, so you know, over the next 5 to 10 years, I'm expecting that the global rollout of you know, next generation direct-to-consumer services will be complete. There'll be some consolidation between them. You know, for example, we know later this year Sky and Paramount is launching Sky Showtime, which is going to be sort of aggregated platform with content from across different services. Essentially, I'm seeing a market which is going to be split between pay and free, and I think that's going to be very interesting. I'm thinking something that looks quite similar to pay TV and free broadcast TV, as we have here in Europe. You know, it's going to be similar, but you know, new TV is going to look very much like old TV, but it's going to be online. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Thank you so much, both of you, Tony Gunnarsson and Andrew Rosen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Still to come here on the agenda. Ready to explode. Is China set to dominate the global market for online video? Welcome back to the agenda. For most tech giants, China is the holy grail, a market of more than 1 billion potential customers. But things are very different in the world of subscription video on demand. Most of the streamers who describe themselves as global have little or no presence there. Will that ever change? And what does the future of the Chinese streaming market really look like? Well, joining me now from Shanghai is the CFO of China's market-leading streaming company, iQIYI, Jun Wang. Thanks ever so much for coming on the programme. It's great to see you. I wonder if you could talk us through what the difference is between the Chinese streaming market and the rest of the world.
Probably would be easier to look at the similarity first. I would say that China has, let's just pick up two major markets as a comparison, China and the US. And for China and the US, both markets have massive user base. In China, we have 1.4 billion people, in the US over 330 million. Then both markets, for the users, they love long-form videos, i.e. the movies, the dramas, the reality shows. And we all have established leaders in the streaming service market. In US, it's Netflix, in China, it's iQIYI. But the interesting thing between two markets is that as the leaders, they take different approaches and different value propositions for the users. And it essentially comes down to the question of what we will offer to user and how much we will charge them, right? So in the US, what you're looking at is more likely a pure play video streaming services where you'll find premium shows, premium dramas and movies in a library. In China, of course, you will find a similar premium content in the movie category, in the dramas, in the reality shows. But in addition to that, we are also inclined to offer a total solution of the digital media services. For example, in addition to the whatever listed above, we also have the comic books, we have ebooks, we have online games, we have live broadcastings, et cetera, et cetera. So our approach is that we want to integrate all these services together to make them more attractive to our users and to attract as big user base as possible. So I think this is one of the key differences in our business philosophies. Then as a result, since we are appealing to the biggest audience base as possible, I think we are charging, although we are using the subscription fee business model as well, we are charging them really at a very affordable price, let's say $2 per month. And this is a very distinct comparison compared with the established market where the service fee will be substantially higher.
I'd like to zone in on your results because it was interesting for the first quarter of 2022. Total revenues, they dropped slightly, but when it came to subscriptions, new users, you saw an increase there. I mean, what do you put that down to?
Right. This is exactly what we talk about. This is the value we deliver to the users, i.e., we try our best to understand what they want and offer them the best solutions that they can find from the market. In the first quarter, we launched quite a few blockbuster shows to start with. For example, one show we launched called Lifelong Journey. This is, my friends told me that they would best describe them as the Chinese version of This Is Us. It demonstrates the ordinary people's perspective to understand how this world change over time. And this attracts millions and millions of the users. And in addition to that, they will also launch other categories, such as a show called Under the Skin. And this is the Chinese version of The Bones. And this particularly attracted the young persons. Generally speaking, they have higher interest in the dramas with the suspensions and the crimes. So I think with the help of these premium shows, we attracted more users. I think before the first quarter, our total subscribing member already quickly approached 100 million. And during the quarter, we had achieved a net addition of 4.4 million again. This is a great result for us.
Are you saying then it's not just about subscriber numbers, but the amount that they're all spending? Is that what you're looking for, to make sure that each of those subscribers spends big?
Yes, I think this is, from data perspective, it is very clear that our subscribers are spending more. I think another way to look at it is that we continue to create a value for our subscribers. As a result, they are willing to pay us a little bit more for more premium content. So this is our take. For the inputs, our commitment is delivering as high quality content as possible. Then naturally, we believe the increasing paying willingness is only the natural result, given we only charge $2 a month, which is very, very low, even by global standard. And we do believe there are significant upside going forward from business perspective.
You're talking about subscribers spending more for juicy content, but what about advertising? Because you've got companies who'll pay to have their adverts on these streaming platforms, and then you'll have your membership, your subscribers paying not to see the adverts. So, I mean, that's good news for the platform, but in terms of a sustainable business model, is it?
Right. You're asking a very interesting question. So let's look back into the history, Juliet. I think the iQIYI is founded 12 years ago. And since the day one, iQIYI do not charge subscribers. They actually offer free content in total in exchange for advertisement dollars, right? So we introduced subscription model only 7 years ago. And now the subscription model becomes the largest revenue contributor, accounting for over 60% of our total revenue in the first quarter, I think 2022. Then looking at our US counterparty, it's very interesting that Netflix has been sticking to the subscription model throughout. But recently, I think they are considering the possibility of launch ad-based tiering product as well, which will be specifically designed for the users, basically who will be more inclined or be more receptive to the advertisement embedded products. I'm very sure that there is no one single business model that can survive without change over time. And every sound business model needs to be adaptive. It needs to be adaptive to the change of the technology. It needs to be adaptive to the change of the market. And it needs to be adaptive to the changing competitive landscape as well. So I think both of us, as the leaders in very different geographical regions, both of us are working our best to find this sweet spot that where the market can take.
Well, let's talk about finding that sweet spot, because you mentioned Netflix, but they have very low presence in China, in your core market. So are you looking maybe to collaborate with them, to work with them so that you could have their juicy content on your platform?
Right. Juliet, I think you ask another great question again. I think as a platform, our commitment is to bring the best content to our users to the extent possible. So our platform already integrated the premium content coming from the global content producers. You can find some of the best shows coming from Korea, coming from Japan, coming from US, Europe, and Bollywood as well. So this is something we're absolutely open-minded, because this is in line with our understanding of value creation for our users, right? This is the only thing that matters. Then coming down to the specifics, on top of that, we are also actively looking at the overseas opportunities, because we believe the Chinese content is competitive. It represents a very unique touch of the Chinese artistic field, and it can be enjoyed by the audience from different backgrounds as well. So we are basically launching our overseas platform to bring the Chinese content out to the overseas audiences as well. So I think in both ways, we are open-minded, very much look forward to integrate as much content as possible for our users. And I don't think that I will be able to comment on any of the specific, for example, business approaches or collaborations, etc. But from a platform perspective, integrating premium content for the users is something embedded in their mission.
So you see the international companies having more of a footprint in China, and companies like yours also looking to expand more internationally. But I wonder, in terms of that content, you're talking global content, where do you get the balance between that and more local niche content?
Right. I think a balance actually is not by design, it's by discovery. This is my take. We always use the same methodology. We try to understand our users, which is basically over 100 million paying members, but also another 200 or 300 million free users. We take them as a whole. We try our best to discover what they are mostly interested in, and then we give them the supply. The process starts with a trial round of something, a portfolio that can be delivered to all the users. Then naturally, through using the technology, using the artificial intelligences and data discovery, we find out the preferences. We find out which category can attract more users. We intend to build up a little bit more or source a little bit more, either by self-production or by collaborating with third parties. So this is the process. And in summary, I think that we are working at our best to find this balance, to discover this balance, but we do not, from top-down perspective, to design a certain level of the percentage and assume it will not change. As a matter of fact, as we discussed before, the business is built on a foundation or assumption that consumer appetite will change over time, and we will be adaptive.
Jun Wang, absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can watch every episode of The Agenda in full on CGTN Europe's YouTube channel. And for exclusive extra content from me, my guests and the rest of the team, don't forget to check out @The Agenda Show on TikTok. Coming up on a future agenda. As Europe prepares for its summer holidays, can airports and airlines really cope in a post-COVID world? But for now, from me, Juliet Mann, and all the Agenda team here in London, goodbye.